Level up your LA Kings experience with the new Vivid Seats Elite Seats. All the on-ice Kings action with even more exclusive access. Enjoy great seats to the game along with premier dining inside the Lexus Club with all-you-can-eat food and non-alcoholic beverages. Plus, get a free Team LA Kings item and parking with your purchase. Score your Vivid Seats Elite Seats tickets today and earn rewards on each purchase from the only ticket company that rewards you for buying. Experience it live with Vivid Seats, the official partner of the LA Kings.
You're listening to an LA Kings podcast. For more episodes of this and every other Kings program, visit lakings.com/podcast.
You're listening to All the Kings Men, the official podcast of the LA Kings. Now, here's your host, Jesse Cohen.
All right, it's Monday morning. That means it's time to crown a King of the Week. We are recording this late Sunday evening, and joining me here today to crown the King of the Week is the Mayor, a.k.a. John, or I guess John Hoven, a.k.a. the Mayor. I got that backwards. How you doing today, John?
You know, Jess, I've known you for over 20 years. It's great to be back. It is funny, isn't it? It's great to be back with you, though, and I'm excited to do this episode tonight. I'm really looking forward to it.
So it was an up and down week, not record-wise, but just game-wise, because the Kings win a 6-5 game against Vegas and a 2-1 overtime game against St. Louis, but they also lose to St. Louis and they lose to Chicago. Now, I think you and I chit-chatted on the phone earlier in the week, and my attitude was like, I'm just not going to let a stretch of games upset me or get me too excited. And my recollection is that you generally agreed with me.
Yeah, I did, and I think that around the team in general, that's been a lot of the sort of talking points and thought as well. Jim Hiller has made reference to that. I think Rob Blake made reference to that as well during his post-trade deadline conference, saying, hey, look, most of the year, the Kings team was in the top 10 and for winning percentage, points percentage, et cetera. So, yeah, it's a little bit of a bad stretch right here, but hey, it played out exactly the way it needed to against the Blues. They start out with a loss, then they build to a tie, then they get to a win. So
yeah, I should have clarified. The loss to the Blues on the 5th was a shootout. So I mean, the record isn't 2-2; it's 2-1-1, which is still 5 out of 8 points.
But Jesse, how about this? Did it feel like a 2-1-1 week? Because I don't think it did.
No, but that's why I said it was a weird roller coaster week, but mainly because of the results within the games. But the thing that I have sort of come to land on is that they're closer to passing Edmonton for second place and home ice advantage than they are to Calgary or Vancouver passing them. And at the middle point of the week, that wasn't necessarily, Calgary won that game on Saturday or whatever it was. And if the Kings had lost to St. Louis in regulation, Calgary would have been nipping on their heels and you would have started tugging the collar going like, oh God, are they going to be a wild card spot? But no, they won the 2 games and now they're, like I said, they're closer to Edmonton than they are to Calgary, which is good.
I look at the team like this. There's a 95% chance of them making the playoffs.
Is that the money puck number?
Yeah, exactly. From Money Puck, it's been between 94 and 96 the last week or 10 days. Just call it 95, and, it's a nice round number. So, 95% chance of making the playoffs. They're probably not going to finish first. Some things would happen. I mean, it's possible. It's not totally out of the realm of possibility, but I would say probably not. So it's, it's second, third, or fourth. And the way the schedule lays up for the balance of the regular season, you have to like the Kings' chances. So, get comfortable with the new lines. We'll talk about that, I'm sure. And, away they go. We'll see what happens here. Really, it's funny because coming out of the game tonight against Vegas, Jim Hiller said that he thought the Warren Foegele goal was the most important goal of the game. And I don't know why, but the first thing that came to mind was, game 83 is going to be the most important game that you're going to coach. So,
yeah.
Really at this point, it feels a lot like a waiting game trying to get to game 83.
I heard that quote from him and I had a moment where I just crinkled my nose and I was like, well, I mean, I don't know. Wasn't Kempe's goal the most important goal? But then you look back on it and you're like, well, I want to say Edmonton there. Vegas did keep pressing and the Kings did need to keep getting the lead. And Fogel's goal did come at a point in the game where they had been sort of dominated for a long period of time. and it broke that momentum. So listen, he's the coach. I'll take his word for it. But let's go ahead. I think in our conversation, we're going to get into talking about some of the new lines. So you know the format. We'll start with you. Your honorable mention this week.
Hey, Jess, real quick, though, just to loop back briefly. What about this, though? The fact that Warren Fogle has scored in all 4 of the games, and the fact that he's not the Kempe, he's not the big goal scorer on the team, but he does seem to score in important moments. And so I also think that's why that goal was important, because once again, when they needed some almost what I would call secondary offense, there was Warren Fogle. And those games against Vegas are big games, right? Because they're at the top of the Pacific Division. They've almost become as important as Edmonton in terms of a measuring stick game, even though the Kings haven't had a playoff run with anybody other than Edmonton the last couple of years. But those 2 teams, the 2 best teams in the Pacific Division, are measuring stick games, and Fogle has risen to the occasion. So, whether you could debate it was the most important goal in the game, I certainly think it was a very important goal either way. So anyway, you look like you want to respond to that.
Well, yeah. So this is one of my, crazier takes that some people disagree with me, and then I feel like I have to try and explain it. But generally speaking, if you're a playoff team, you have some version of Anze Kopitar and Drew Doughty. Not the type of player, but just like you will have a number 1 center, you will have a number 1 defenseman. Like if you're a playoff team, you have good players.
Yep.
The thing that separates great teams from, 3 seeds and 4 seeds is depth. And so you get into this weird situation where, you look at, let's just use the Kings as an example, into the summer of 2014. They lose Willie Mitchell, and then they very quickly lose Slava Voinov. And so you lose both guys off of your second pair. And even though it's your second pair, and I would never sit here and tell you that Mitchell and Voinov were more important than Doughty, losing both of them, so losing your entire second pair, is like crippling to your chances of succeeding. And a guy like Warren Fogle is exactly what you described. He's depth. He's not going to pull the toughest minutes against the other team's top defensemen. When you go down the lineups and you start matching, lines against lines and players against players, he's the kind of guy you need. And he's had a really huge season where he scores at meaningful moments and meaningful times. And yeah, I totally agree with you.
Yeah, a lot of times you can point to that 3C, right? You don't talk about your 3C a lot until you get to the playoffs, and all of a sudden, to your point, because the good players, the great players, right, the elite players, they're there on almost every playoff team. But the ones that have that third line center, those are usually the teams that can advance in the playoffs. So
it's an imperfect metaphor, but I've had this argument with lots of people time and time again. If we're comparing 2 race cars, and far more about race cars than I do.
You instantly had my attention. I wanted to know where you were going.
Sorry. Well, you'll see. It's like I said, it's a broken metaphor, but you can quibble about engines and weight and maneuverability and everything. But if at the very last minute I reach into one of the cars and just remove the steering wheel, well, it doesn't matter. You can't if you don't have a steering wheel, you can't drive. Period. The end. It doesn't matter if everything else about your car is great. So that's those players in my mind are like, you just can't build a car without all of the component parts, and people I think forget about the steering wheels. So.
You know what though? I unintended, you're going to set me up perfectly on this one.
All right.
Because you asked who the honorable mention is.
Yeah.
And my honorable mention, I would like to believe, is not going to be the same player as you. I love it when we disagree.
Sure.
So my honorable mention is the newest LA King, who only played in a couple of games, in Kuzmenko. And the reason for that is this. I was shocked. I would say I was pretty shocked that Hiller put him up on the top line. I just thought that sets really high expectations for a player that hadn't even had a practice really with the team yet. That I expected him to be more. I really thought about it, by the way, just to expand on this. Where are they going to play him? And you and I normally talk about these kind of things, and we just didn't have a chance to this weekend before the games. But I actually thought they probably would put him with Deneau. Reason being, the most natural spot for me would have been on the Byfield line. Just move Laffy up to the top line and put Kuzmenko on that line, but I know they like how well that line's been playing. QB has become the Fiala whisperer, and Laffy is almost like the perfect, third component. So figuring they were going to leave that line alone, I thought, okay, well, then they're going to put him with Deneau. Kuzmenko's a player that's not known for his defense. Put him with a really smart defensive player in Deneau. And really, the key on the Deneau line is typically more. So, moving a player off that line is not going to be, quote unquote, as important or difficult as it would be of moving Trevor Moore off, who is Deneau's winger. So I thought that's where they would put him, and I was really surprised. So the reason I give Kuzmenko the honorable mention is to be to arrive in town, 8:00. He lands at LAX on Friday night. He's in the lineup on Saturday and Sunday with his new team, and I just think that's an honorable mention to be able to jump right into the. Oh, and by the way, he didn't just play 2 games. He played the division leading, Vegas Golden Knights on the back-to-back on the road. I think he's the honorable mention of the week for me.
Well, I've got bad news for you, John. We agree.
I hate when we agree. It's so fun.
I chose him for a totally different set of reasons.
Okay.
Mainly because I have a pretty simple rule, which is if a guy scores his first goal or plays his first game, like you get honorable mention.
Okay. All right.
So he was sort of like a slam dunk for me. But I do want to talk about him because I'm curious what you think about the Adrian Kempe power play goal against the Vegas Golden Knights, which I thought was, man, could there not have been a better time for them to finally break through and score on the power play? And, we've talked on King's Talk and on All the King's Men about the fact that the power play had gotten to the point where it wasn't just bad or ineffective. It had actually gotten to the point where it was giving away momentum to the other team.
Not good.
No, that's very not good. They turned it around in the overtime win against St. Louis. The power play just went back to not scoring, but at least it wasn't giving up momentum. Tonight, they scored. Now, I don't know if Kuzmenko being on the ice where he was when Kempe shot the puck mattered, because he wasn't like a fantastic passing option, but he was out there. He was a passing option.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to overthink one power play goal.
Sure.
Simply because I'd like to see a larger, body of work. But it is interesting because just stepping up to kind of 30,000 foot level for a second, I think in the beginning, so many people were quick to dismiss, oh, that's the only trade they made. Oh, that's what they did, And then when you start looking at it a little bit more and you go, wow, this guy scored 39 goals just 2 years ago, I actually give him a little bit of a pass also because when you're traded and when you're playing on multiple teams in the same year, sometimes you don't get your footing, And I think about Rantanen, right? Just look at what happened with Rantanen, and he's the prime example of this. People don't want to give other players the benefit of the doubt, but if you look at the Rantanen situation and what he was able to do in Colorado, and then how it just didn't work at all in Carolina, and he ends up going somewhere else, guys, it just happens sometimes, right? It's not a good fit for a variety of different reasons. And maybe he wasn't comfortable in one of those cities. I don't know. I'm not making excuses for him. I'm just saying that there's typically more to the story than just the stats, and people I think were quick to point, oh, this guy only has 6 goals or, whatever. Let's just wait and see how this whole thing plays out. He is a right shot and he's helping on the power play. And, so for no other reason, that should be a good thing for the Kings.
Yeah. And, listen, he had 3 shots on goal tonight. I think he was a +2. I mean, he is noticeable. And for a team that needs guys to be noticeable, I mean, it's so far so good, I guess. All right,
Jesse, I'm going to come up with my own rule, by the way.
Yeah,
I'm going to piggyback on your idea. I'm going to come up with my own rule. Anytime that a guy wears a jersey number for the first time in Kings history, he's automatically honorable mention. He's the first 96 in LA Kings history. That's 50 plus years of hockey. First guy ever to wear 96. Well, I'm just telling you.
I did see the stat that he becomes only the 7th player to wear a number in the 90s. And my first thought, of course, was to like, all right, well, how many guys can I think of off the top of my head? And I totally forgot about Ryan Smith. And my first instinct, I know you love him. He was whatever to me. And so my first thought was like, well, obviously Gretzky's fantastic. Tocchet and Clark both wore 92, so pretty good. Roenick wore 97, not great. And then I was like, oh, I can't for the life of me remember who else wore a number in the 90s. And like I said, I totally forgot Ryan Smith. It's actually a fairly successful decade of numbers. That's not the right word, but you know what I mean?
Block of numbers? Is that why you're the 90s? Okay.
Yeah. Like all things considered, it's I would have I just off the top of my head I was like, oh, I bet you it's terrible, but it's actually pretty good.
We're going to get a bunch of complaints on Twitter about this, but I would say that historically number 12 has not been a good number for the LA Kings in totality. There have been isolated moments, and number 10 has also not really had the best run.
6 and 10 are the numbers that I frequently see people talking about as being cursed. Unfortunately, and Kings fans can get as mad at me if they want about this. Unfortunately, when you have a franchise with the history that the Kings had up until 2010, there's not a lot of numbers that are like doing a lot of work. Not a lot of numbers doing a lot of heavy lifting for the franchise. So
not everybody can be a number 7 named Tomas Sandstrom. That's all I'm saying.
Sure. All right, your runner up then for this week.
I'm going to tell you something weird about my runner up. Okay.
All right.
My runner up to me feels kind of obvious, but at the same time, I'm not very confident in this only because my runner up has had a rough go of late. Okay.
All right.
But since you like to kind of put heavy brackets around the week, I can't necessarily be influenced by the prior 30 days. I have to go off of the recency bias of the last
4 games.
7. So, yeah, in those 4 games, I'm going with number 11. I'm going with the captain, Andrei Kopitar, as the runner-up for me.
Well, I'm glad you did, because I just
You better not tell me you agreed with me again.
No, I don't have him in my top 3.
Okay,
and I felt terrible about it because, I mean, not that the players care or not that it matters, but I still felt bad about it because he had 3 goals and 1 assist, and you know he had the first goal of the game against St. Louis, the first goal of the game against Vegas, you know, and yeah, it matters. And he's come back alive, and he had 4 points, and he was tied for the team lead in points, and he's got Kuzmenko on his wing, and he's, you know, listen, it can't be easy having a winger who just joined the team and, you know, as Jim Hiller said, probably had like one crash lunch meeting of like, this is what we do on the power play, this is what we do on the penalty kill, this is what we do on the neutral zone. Good luck, smack him on the butt and get him out on the ice.
Hey, by the way, real
games.
Quickly, that's another good reason that Kuzmenko deserved to be the honorable mention. You know, it's not easy to play with Kopitar, and Kopi doesn't always like wingers, you know, and he made it through the first 2 games on back-to-back nights. So good to him. Good on him, right?
Listen, Hiller, you know, there was a lot of talk out of Rob Blake about the D pairs going back to the way they were, and Hiller was asked about it and confirmed it, and it took all of, I don't know, 40 minutes for him to start pulling D pairs apart and mixing and matching them. So, I mean, listen, the fact that we've had those 3 guys on a line together for 2 straight games without any changes, pretty impressive, all things considered.
I did like when Blake said something about it doesn't. I don't really know where he's going to start. Right. It doesn't matter because, you know, 2 shifts later, Hiller's going to mix them up. Anyway, I'm on the edge of my seat. Who is your runner up?
Well, my runner up was Quentin Byfield.
Now I'm even more intrigued. Okay,
because he had 3 points. He had 3 goals and 3 points. And his goal against St. Louis was so just personally important to me. Like, I just needed them to win that game for my own mental health. And it was an impressive goal. It was a really nice goal. And listen, 3 goals is 3 goals. And he is playing a ton of minutes. He has become the leading forward in minutes played. And he has been given a larger role. Did you just call him the Fiala Whisperer earlier in this conversation? Yeah. Listen, that's not nothing.
No,
right?
it's
Like
not.
that is not an insignificant accomplishment.
Hey, look at it this way. Fiala speaks 5 languages,
Yeah.
4 on a daily basis.
Yeah.
There's a whole other language, which is Fiala, and Byfield speaks Fiala. So that is
Listen,
kudos to him.
it is going to be important to this team. Last
Sure.
season in the playoffs, Fiala and Dubois were not particularly present. Fiala does not have a great track record in the playoffs. So if they can find an actual forward with actual skill to play with Fiala, so that it's not Trevor Lewis and Alex Laferriere and Kevin Fiala on some sort of weird Frankenstein third/fourth line.
Wait a minute. Why are you bringing Laffy down in this conversation? What's going on here?
Because they don't have a Blake Lizotte anymore. I'm just trying to okay, Tanner Jeannot, Trevor Lewis and Kevin Fiala, whatever combination of if they can actually make a line with Kevin Fiala that is dangerous offensively, great. And more importantly, if Quentin Byfield can score the kind of goals that he's scoring now, and Jim Fox mentioned it on the telecast, when he first broke into the league, all of his goals were scored from 3 inches away from the goal mouth. Now he's scoring from distance. Now he's scoring on shots. He's making moves. He's being physical. He's playing 20 minutes a night. He is obviously he's not the number 1 center on this team, but he's playing more minutes than Kopitar on a nightly basis over the last however many weeks it's been, and certainly in the last 4 games. And all of that combined, I just felt like, but like I said, I'm glad you mentioned Kopitar, because now I'm just going to talk about Kopitar for a second. He has also come alive this week with 4 points, and the team isn't going to go anywhere without both of those guys contributing. And so to have both of them contributing, I think both of them deserve some sort of recognition. So I'm glad that you mentioned Kopitar.
Hey, just to round out this conversation, or this part of the conversation, I do want to give a quick shout out to Zach Dooley as well. I was talking with Duels the other night. He didn't. I don't believe he used the actual phrase Fiala whisper, but he was the one who was really driving that part of the conversation about Q's ability to speak Fiala. So I wouldn't necessarily say that it was a complete observation on my part. Alone. We were having a conversation, so I want to give Duels some credit and all of that. And the other thing is, you mentioned Q's shot. Q, shoot the puck more. I think really that's been the most frustrating and aggravating thing for me this year, is the deferring. And so I was glad to hear Hiller talking about that the other night after the game, and just saying, look, he needs to stop deferring. Of course, the first thing that I thought of was Adrian Kempe, because that was a complaint with Kempe earlier in his career as well. And once he stopped deferring, or deferring less, let's just at least say that, and started shooting the puck more, the goals started coming. So yes, Q, you've worked on that shot. You've spent a lot of time crafting it and developing it, and you need to start using it, and with confidence, because you would see him also take, when he wasn't deferring, you would see him take what I would call weak shots. And he was, he wasn't, you could tell the puck wasn't going to go in, just the way that his body language was. And that's changed dramatically over the last 30 days. So I like to see it. And I'm also completely flabbergasted who you're going to take for King of the Week. So
I imagine we'll have the same one at this point, but I do want to say,
it's impossible.
I do want to say the deferring thing is kind of the double-edged sword of the way that the team is currently constructed. Because if you talk to the players in the locker room and you mention either Drew Doughty or Anze Kopitar, they know who these guys are, right? Doughty and Kopitar don't have to be jerks who demand the puck from the rookies. Everybody in that locker room, from the rookies to the veterans, know who these guys are, right? Like, I've had veterans in that locker room talk to me about Anze Kopitar and refer to him as a legend. Like, yeah, people are going to defer to them. It's when I go and I'm talking to, Nick Nixon and Jim Fox, I'm going to defer to them, right? I won't defer to Austin Stanovich, no disrespect to Austin Stanovich, and I may, defer to you or Dennis in various levels of, depending on my mood. But if Nick or Jim start talking, I'm going to shut up, right? Like, it's just human nature.
I put it this way. On a team, a sports team, okay, You have a dad, you have your older brother. Well,
Okay.
and dad can be plural, right? I think
Sure.
Kopitar is a dad on the team.
Sure.
And then I think you have your big brother, which is who I think Kempe is, and then you have your peers especially when you're a young player sort of breaking in, right? And I think that you're trying more to impress your peers. They're the ones that push you and drive you and that you want to be better than. Turcotte, for example, is not trying to be better than Kopitar. He's not trying to be the next Kopitar. He looks up to him in a dad way. He looks up to Kempe and he'll listen to him more like a big brother, I also, just a little side note, I think this is one of the funny things about Kevin Fiala. I don't know where he kind of fits because he's not the big brother and he's not the dad, but he's also not part of like the Laffy Clark Turcotte clique either. But he kind of tries to be and hang out with them. It's a little theory I'm working on. I'll put out an article someday about it.
The cousin that's in a band that comes to town every now and then?
Maybe that's what it is. Yeah, that's a good one.
Rolls in and he's got a skateboard and, you're like, yeah. What's going on with cousin Kevin? And it's like, I don't know, but he's cool as hell.
Yeah, he's the 23-year-old guy still hanging with 18-year-old seniors. Yeah, that's kind of, anyway. So yeah, it's Kopi's the dad, right? And he knows that, and he's comfortable with it, and he's very self-deprecating when you talk to him about it, and it's become sort of a humorous thing. But
I mean, even look at the helmet ritual, right? The players, I think it was Anderson, and I forget who else started the ritual of having that goofy little tiny helmet that sat on top of people's heads.
Right.
And then like 3 games into it, Kopitar was like, oh, hold on. Let me hold on. What are we doing here? Let me go call my buddy, the F1 racer, and get a proper helmet. So like, yeah, they're going to defer to him. It's going to happen. All right. You're king of the week, John.
Well, the reason why a moment ago I said it's impossible for us to have the same king of the week is that your runner-up is my king of the week.
Oh, okay. All right.
So Quentin that's why I have no idea. I literally have no idea who you're going to pick. Quentin Byfield, for all the reasons that we've just been discussing, he is definitely my king of the week. I just thought he had a monstrous week, and we've basically covered it at this point. But yeah, Q is my king of the week.
I mean, we can talk about him some more if you want, because he's been really good.
He has been. What are your thoughts about the third person on that line? I mean, we talked about his relationship and being the Fiala whisperer. Do you have a personal preference about who is the other winger on that line? Do you like it as it's constructed now? Would you like to see a different look?
I think I would like to see a different look only, and I don't have any particularly good argument for it. I just, like tonight, LaFerriere had that play where he broke down the left side and he beat his man, and he really was like quite fast. And I was like, oh, I never realized he was actually that fast before. I didn't think of him as slow. I just didn't think of him as like one-on-one foot race, beat the guy clean by 10 feet. But there's something about the way that Byfield and Fiala play. There's a level that they can both go to, even if they're not constantly at that level, that I'm not sure that LaFerriere can elevate to. Right? Like, we know what Fiala can do when he's, out of having an out-of-body experience, and we've seen Quentin Byfield score 2 or 3 goals or make a couple of passes where you're like, like the Columbus goal, just go back to it. I was not aware that human bodies could execute that sequence of moves without, screwing up and then finish and score a goal. Like I didn't know. And especially in a body that size. So I kind of, I'm trying not to fall prey to like Twitter influence or whatever, but everybody was really excited and hyped about Kempe, Byfield, and Fiala. And I think
I don't like that combination.
I mean, like I said, I only throw it out there because everybody else threw it out there, and everyone was like, "Oh my god, this is the most amazing line ever." I'm
gonna give you a weird one. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. You have one?
Well, I'm perfectly happy right now with LaFerriere on that line because I really like Fogel with Deneau and Moore, and I think if Kuzmenko, Kopitar, and Kempe build on the chemistry that they appear to be building on. It's 2 games, so I don't want to like start throwing fancy stats around as if they mean anything. But in the 2 games that they've played together, they have controlled play. The puck is in their end and they're taking shots and the other team isn't. So if you can get that line working, and if you can get the Danault Moore Fogle line is working, it's perfect as far as I'm concerned. And then if Laferriere can really just hold his own with Byfield and Fiala, I'm happy with that for now, and we'll see how it goes. And there's 20 games to tinker. And then the fourth line will be, whatever the fourth line will be. And I don't know. We'll see, I guess. But what's your weird combo that you want to see?
Yeah, I'm gonna put a little fly in the ointment, and I'll also tell you why I don't think it's going to happen. And really, the trade is going to probably prevent this from happening. But I would have liked to have seen Turcotte on that line. I've seen him play with Byfield in the past, and I like that. And I also think that Turk reads the play very well, and sometimes other people don't catch up with him as quickly. You saw, this is going way back to the World Juniors, though, when he would play with Zegras, when he would play with Kaliev, and how they were all able to read off of each other. I'd like to see more of that combo. I just don't think that it's possible, because I don't think you're going to end up seeing Laff push down to the fourth line. If Trevor Moore went into another slump, maybe temporarily he would go down to the fourth line, and so Laff ends up on the third line. But you're not paying Trevor Moore $4 million plus to be on the fourth line, and there really isn't another player to push down to the fourth line other than Turcotte. So, to borrow your phrase about the way the team is currently constructed, I don't think that we will see that. But I am still curious at some point to see Turcotte get some time, even if it's next season, with Byfield.
So this is not fair, what I'm about to say. But I have this weird thing where when a guy hits the age of 24, my brain just goes, that's who he is.
Well, for the most part, that's as a forward, not as a defenseman or a goalie, but as a forward.
In my brain, when a guy hits 24, I'm like, that's who he is. And so as exciting as, you mentioned the World Juniors with Zegras and Kaliev and Turcotte, he was a 5th overall pick, so he obviously had a draft profile. And I don't mean to be insulting to Alex Turcotte, but my attitude is kind of like, if he was gonna be the kind of player that people are wanting him to be and that you're kind of describing him, like, we would have seen it. And he played with Kopitar and Kempe a lot this year.
It goes back to my earlier comment, though. It's harder. It's really hard to play with Kopitar and Kempe, especially when one's the dad and one's the big brother, and you're the young kid trying to break. This is his first year breaking in. I'm not trying to make excuses, because I actually, for the most part, agree with you. That's why when the Kings traded away Tyler Madden, sort of like, I was okay with it, right? It's like, look, a player at a certain age, that's sort of, that is who they are, regardless of who they were supposed to be or what you want them to be. Yeah. I think Kirk is a little bit of an exception, only because you look at the number of games played because of the injuries. So you have to maybe give him another extra sort of year. But defensemen also, I would not agree with you. As much as I agree with you about the forwards, I wouldn't agree with you on the defensemen, only because they tend to mature a little bit later. So you'd probably have to go closer to 25, give them an extra season. But
maybe for me, I don't know where I got the number 24 from, but I think it's just sort of like, at some point, at 24, you're probably 6 years out from your draft. And like, there would have been some indication that you were. I want to talk really briefly about Tyler Madden, though. And I don't want to throw any criticism Tyler Madden's way, but Tyler Madden is 25 years old. He'll be 26 November 9th of this later this year, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
He's too small.
Well, I was surprised, to be honest, that they brought him back this year, because using your gauge of 24, just looking at his body of work as a professional, he was who he was. And so I was actually kind of surprised that he came back this year. And the biggest sort of, I guess, criticism that one could make of Tyler Madden is that he really never put any weight on after they acquired him from Vancouver. And if he would have bulked up a little bit, what would that have meant? How would it have been different? I always have a lot of time and a lot of energy and patience with players where their dads were coaches, whether like Kopitar or whether their dad was a former player, and obviously John Madden's both a former player, Stanley Cup winner, and a coach. So he just has that good pedigree. He wasn't big enough for the NHL. So,
but also this is a guy who, like, okay, in 2021-22, 31 points in 48 games, and you go, okay, low game total, mid points, but like 31, 40, okay, whatever. But then the next is 33 points in 71 games, 34 points in 71 games. And then this year, 25 points in 47 games. He's like, all right, well, he is what he is. And what he is a middle six AHL player.
Yeah, and this year, again, just context, certainly not making any excuses. Context-wise, he was playing much lower in the lineup this year than he had in previous years as well.
Now, having said that, there's a ton of former Kings that have gone on, Asimont, Brodzinski, the guys that I would have just shrugged and said, like, yeah, that I'll never hear that name again. And then there they are on an NHL roster proving me all sorts of wrong. So,
hey, if Tyler Madden ends up having a great NHL career, more power to him. He's a great guy. I also love his personal love life story. Tyler Madden married Maddie, so she's Maddie Madden, which is hilarious. And he's Mads. So there's a whole lot of confusion going on in there. Yeah. And they moved to Minnie. So, it's just there's a lot going on there.
And what happens if one of them gets upset? Are they mad? Anyway. All right.
My king is almost as bad as Jim Fox's comment about Kuzi saying he'll keep your beer warm.
Oh my God. I love Jim to death, but yeah, it took me a second. I was embarrassed at how long it took me to get that. He was like, hand him a cold beer, he'll handle it. And I was like, is he taking a shot at this dude's drink? Like, this dude likes to drink? Like what? And then I was like, oh my God, a beer koozie. Like, oh my Jeez, that one was rough, but hey, whatever.
He's Jim Fox. He's okay. He's allowed one.
No, absolutely. My king of the week, and I don't think it should be that big a surprise, is Adrian Kempe. He had one goal, 3 assists, 4 points. He had the power play goal against the Vegas Golden Knights. He had 12 shots on goal, which in the 4 games was second only behind Alex Laferriere. Go figure. He played 18 minutes and 43 seconds of ice time, which was only behind Byfield in forwards minutes played. By the way, at some point, I don't know if I've bothered you about this, but at some point, I have to talk to somebody about how many minutes Joel Edmondson is playing because it's crazy. But anyway.
I want to get back to your comment a second ago where you said, oh, it shouldn't have been that surprise. So you're telling me that Byfield played more minutes and scored more goals, but somehow Kempe is the king of the week. And we're all supposed to know that Kempe was the king of the week when Kopitar had 3 goals and Byfield had 3 goals.
Once it wasn't Kopitar, once it wasn't Byfield, once it wasn't, all the guys with all the
idea.
points.
No, right, no idea. I thought you were going to pull out something crazy. So
no.
It's half crazy, I guess.
It could have been Warren Fogle. It could have been Kevin Fiala, but it wasn't. Well, he had a goal and 2 assists. Like, Listen, the king of the week math for me is not that difficult. It's pretty much just looking at who had the most points and then going down the list and being like, all right.
Well, clearly you went halfway down the list before you picked your guy, but that's okay.
I started at the top, actually. 4 points in 4 games. And honestly, as goofy as this sounds, scoring a power play goal is just so important. Like, I had this
30th in the league. It definitely is important. Yes.
I mean, it is like that. I had this thing on King's Talk that I talked about last night where I said, there are these moments. Fortunately, we haven't had one with Kuzmenko yet, but there was a moment early in Dubois' season as a King where he had a breakaway. Some caller said it was the Buffalo game. It was like 20 games in, or maybe I'm getting my stories confused. Anyway, early in the season, Dubois had a breakaway. And in my mind, I was like, oh my God, he's going to score on this breakaway. It's going to be incredible. It's going to be an amazing start to his LA Kings career. This is going to be fantastic. Great, perfect, wonderful. And then he didn't score. And I was like, oh, wah. And then it just never really. Now, I'm not going to say that moment had anything to do with the rest of the season, but you're the perfect person to bring up my other.
This is why you are one of one, Jesse.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Talking about Dubois.
We're not. We're shifting. But I will ask you. But I will ask you this, because you were absolutely a Kings fan who was alive and paying attention and passionately involved at the team when this happened in 1993.
Yeah.
A rational human being would look at the Marty McSorley penalty and say the team had a 1-0 lead in the series. They were up in the game
Late. Yeah.
All they had to do was kill the penalty. If they couldn't kill the penalty, they could have won the game in overtime. If they lost the game in overtime, they could have won game 3, which also went to overtime. They could have won game 4, which also went to overtime.
Mm-hmm.
Game 5 was they were cooked and it was over. But we all know that they lost because of that penalty, right?
No, I would disagree with you. Well, hold on. Here. Well, I mean, it depends though, right? Because it depends if you're talking about things that can be quantified and not quantified because of everything that you just said. They lost that game absolutely because of that penalty. So yes, just so that we stick to the detail of it, the Canadians were trailing when that penalty was called.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like it was a tie game. That game, they were trailing. So when the penalty ended up in a worst case scenario, right, where the other team scored a power play goal, it only, quote unquote, tied the game.
Right.
The Kings still had plenty of a chance to win that game, which they didn't. So that was a momentum changer. Now the series is tied 1-1 instead of coming back to LA 2-0. Now they're tied 1-1 and they're coming back. They had Patrick Waugh. So I don't necessarily agree. There were other overtime games in that series as well.
Yeah.
So
games 3 and 4.
Yeah. So the series actually was much closer than it looked. People don't remember how close that series really was because it went 5 games and they lost and everyone wants to blame it on Marty. But I don't think that the penalty and the loss in game 2, I don't think that momentum carried over into game 3 because when game 3 happened, there's a day off or 2 days off in between. You're changing buildings. You're going from Montreal to Los
Angeles. I forgot
Angeles.
what a true believer you were. You I thought you were going to agree with me, and I was going to make some sort of crucial point. But the point is, I think moments matter, and Kempe scoring that power play goal, even though when he scored it, we didn't know it was going to be the game winner, and I think when he scored it, it made it 6-3. Something like that. I'm
actually agreeing with you more than disagreeing with you, though. Moments do matter. That moment mattered in that game, but momentum does not carry forward.
All right,
throughout a series.
Well, it capped off the week. It gave the Kings a win, and it makes him the King of the Week. So congratulations, Adrian Kempe, this week's King of the Week.
How is he the King of the Week? I voted for Quentin Byfield
because my super scientific and always correct system weights the points towards my vote. So although Quentin Byfield does wind up with more points this week than Adrian Kempe because I picked him for runner up and you picked him for King of the Week. So they combine.
Yeah, well, coming up early this week, there's a brand new Kings of the Podcast coming out where we're going to crown a King of the Week, and it's going to be Quentin Byfield.
That's fine. You can do whatever you like. All right, so let's take a brief look at the week coming up because, and I'm sorry to bring up his name again, but when Pierre-Luc Dubois was traded to the Capitals, and I looked at the schedule, once the schedule came out in July or whatever it was, I looked at the schedule and I said, oh, well, obviously Ovechkin's going to break Gretzky's record in LA. And it would just be, well, he'd have to score I don't know how many games he's got between now and Thursday, but I don't think
I say it's not going to happen, but it's going to be damn close. Yeah. He's 9 goals away.
So I was positive that I was like, oh, he's going to break the record in LA and it'll be off of a primary assist from Pierre-Luc Dubois, and Kings fans are just going to be ripping their hair out. But they have 3 games at home: Islanders, Caps, and Preds. It's a goofy question, but like, how important is it for them to win 2 out of 3 or come away with, at least 4 out of 6 points?
I'm going to tell you the most important thing about this week, Jesse.
Yeah.
And I'm dead serious when I say this. Finally, the Kings have returned to a normal schedule of Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday at home. This team for 30 years was a Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday at home team. And we've been dealing with this 5:00 Mondays and 2:00 Thursdays and games on Friday afternoon. It's crazy, dude. It's a Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Okay. So Tuesday night.
I think Dennis was the one that pointed out that they would wind up playing something like 29 games without having back-to-back games at the same start time.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And there's only one 7:30 game on Saturday the whole year, which was the Ducks game right before the Four Nations break. Yeah. I've never seen anything like this before. It's literally like they just put all the days and start times into a bowl and just drew random things out. But this week, life is normal. Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Tuesday, Islanders. You have to win that game. Thursday, Capitals. We'll come back to it in a second. No one's talking about PL Dubois. Everyone's talking about Ovechkin. Saturday, you have the Predators at the
5,
weird start. Exactly. At the weird start time of 5:00 on a Saturday. I don't know what's going on and why everybody needs to hurry up and get home on a Saturday night. But anyway, you have to win that game against the Predators as well. So there's your 2 out of 3. The swing game in all of this comes down to the Washington game. And yes, you have to win that game against Washington as well, because although Washington is one of the best, or they are the best team in the league, you need to at least drag that game into overtime. You need to do something because it's another measuring stick game. You're coming off a measuring stick win against Vegas. But as much as Ovechkin's going to dominate the headlines, there still is that Dubois factor to the game. And so I think it is important to have a good showing in that particular game. And you also have the Darcy Kemper factor as well, because, Kemper was the one who came here after the Caps pretty much dismissed him. And you really do have to think about, they're going to trade you for Dubois. Think about what that's going to do to somebody mentally after the year that Dubois had last year. That's how little they think of you, that they would rather have Dubois than have you. So there's going to be money on the board, allegedly, on Thursday. So I think, you have to win almost all 3 of those games or maybe get 5 points out of the 6, because the 2 games you have to win. You have to beat the teams below you at home, which they've been doing all year. So,
have they?
most of the year. Hey, they still have a hell of a home record. You're not going to win every game. And if you want to keep that home record alive, you do need to pick up those wins on Tuesday and Saturday.
All right. Well, that's bold. So because you mentioned the Kemper thing and the being traded for Dubois, I have to bring this up because of the conversations that have been swirling around Kuzmenko. And this is not a knock on Kuzmenko. It was the first thing that popped into my head when I heard the details of the trade. Have you seen Moneyball, the movie Moneyball with Brad Pitt?
Yes, of course.
The moment where he's down, David Justice is down in the batting cage, and Brad Pitt goes down, and they have their little one-on-one, and David Justice says, I've never seen your speech. I've never seen a GM talk to players like that. And he said, you've never seen a GM that was a player. And he says, but I get it. It's patter. It's effect. It's for them. It's not for me. And he goes, oh, you're special? And he goes, well, you're paying me $7 million a year. So yeah, maybe I guess I am a little bit. And he goes, oh, I'm not paying you $7 million a year. The New York Yankees are paying you $3.5 million. So as soon as I saw that 50% of Kuzmenko's salary was retained, I was like, oh no. That's how much the Philadelphia Flyers think of Kuzmenko. Now, obviously, we're not going to play. I don't think we play the Flyers again, do we?
The Kings are not playing the Flyers again this season. No.
Okay, so it's not. They're not paying him to play against them, but it was. I just, like I said, I just chuckled to myself because I was like, oh, well, he's not exactly making $5.5 million against the cap. Anyway, thank you for joining me, John. I appreciate it. That 5:00 game, by the way, might help me out because I do Kings Talk from the office, not from the arena. And it's just easier for me to get home at a reasonable time when the game starts at 5 p.m.
Thank you to Commissioner Bettman and to everybody at the NHL office who had you in mind when they...
Yeah, well, yes, they didn't know I was going to get diagnosed with cancer. They just rolled the dice on it. It all worked out.
And Jess, I would be remiss if I didn't just say, I want to say this. I have probably talked to you more in the last 2 months than I did in the prior 2 years.
Yeah.
But as I said at the top of the program, we've known each other for over 20 years. There have been a fair number of, jabs back and forth at different times through the years. But I mean it when I say it. You are one of one. I'm very happy to stand beside you and support you. And I was honored to come on the program tonight and speak with you as well. I'm happy you're back to work and doing what you love. And we want you around for a long, long time, buddy. So do what you have to do and get this thing behind you and onward and upward.
It's all I can do. I appreciate the kind words, and everybody check out Kings of the Podcast. And obviously everybody knows who you are at this point. If you don't know who John Hoven is, you're not a Kings fan. That's what I would say at this point.
Well, they didn't make it this far into the podcast if they did.
No, that's true. That's totally true. All right. I'll talk to you soon, John.
All right. Later, Jess.